So this is the first one. Are you worried about science in the future? This is from Erin, a high school student, either years 7 to 10. Probably direct this one to Dominic and Rosalind.
I'm not worried about science because I think there are always going to be nerdy little kids who want to do science, and being nerdy is cool now, so that's all right. But I am excited about what's going to happen in the future with science. There's so much to explore, and there are a lot of opportunities in careers in science, so no, I'm not worried.
I am worried at the moment just because I know that our scores internationally are dropping, so we should be the top of science in the world, but we're not, so we can do better. And I'm also worried about the fact that we have 30% less kids doing science at the end of school. I think in the innovation, in the technological age where everything's based on some sort of technology or science, children need to understand science. Even if they don't have science careers, they need to understand how science works. They need to understand that climate change is real. They need to understand that we need vaccinations. And they need to base that on scientific fact and scientific thinking, not on some fairy story. So I think it's really important these days, in particular, that children do more science and we're doing less.
Thank you. Yeah, there's a whole stack of questions here, but we've got 3 in the audience. So we've got one up the back there, and then we'll go over here and to there.
Steve Reeve, currently from ABARES, but before I've worked in the forestry industry and also as an academic across agriculture and horticulture. I guess I've got a couple of comments for Rosalind. Fantastic, you made lots of good points that I'm very happy with, but there's a couple of pieces of the jigsaw I might suggest should be differently placed. One is, what does the consumer want was one of your key bits of the logic, but then you had industry as the consumer. And I think it's much more important to focus, as you then did, on the student or the potential student as the consumer, because it's the student incoming group we need to understand the choices they make and give them new choices. So I don't think giving industry ownership of the course helps at all. And the forestry industry, and I think the forestry course has been very well intentioned and completely failed. So we need to focus on the consumer as the student. And the other thing is revitalise ag faculties and ag teaching is really hard when the universities appoint academics, as they should do, based on their research skills, and think of teaching as something else you do to bring the money in, but not your main priority when you're appointed for research. So that duality of priority setting in universities is something I'd love to see addressed at a very high level, because currently I think that underlies a lot of the problems we actually have.
Okay, I'll take the first point first. I'm going to have to disagree with you. All the research that I have seen, shows that one of the reasons children are not doing science and maths is because they don't understand the career pathways. And one of the reasons that industry is not very interested in science graduates is because the science graduates, they don't understand the whole science university process, and they are not getting the sorts of graduates they need, which is a bit of a mismatch. And the only way we can solve that mismatch is by having that industry pool and that interaction between industry and tertiary education and students, so that there's a much more clear pathway, just as there is for medicine, for many of these other science areas. So that's why I disagree, but I completely agree that we need to influence the students and inspire the students. On the second point, I agree. I have recently seen quite a lot of research that's been done on what makes the best teacher, and the best teacher needs to have a very good understanding of their subject, but also needs to have really good teaching skills. One without the other, not good. So we need both, and we do need to think about that, and thank you for that suggestion.
Hi, I'm Reham. I'm from the High Commission of Canada, but I'm actually going to talk to you guys as a student about to start her master's. Are you concerned that starting students out on a Bachelor of Agriculture is actually counteractive? And I ask because it seems that when you talk about science and agriculture, you've kind of amalgamated it, and you know, the three of you come from different perspectives, but there's a difference between encouraging science and a difference between encouraging an agricultural degree. And I think as a student, I have this fear that if you put a student in such a specialized field so soon, right in their bachelor's, then what's going to happen is that you have students not that interested or maybe not experiencing what they want to and then dropping out of a Bachelor of Agriculture. Whereas I think talking about using the student as the consumer, I think the approach should really be focused on a university level as opposed to starting straight out of high school and saying, you're doing a science degree, here are some research projects, here's some funding for some agricultural related projects, here's what industry wants you to do, look at supervisions that's done both through universities and as well as industry so that you can have a team collaboration. But I really do think that there's a danger in starting just with an agricultural degree as opposed to a degree of science.
I think there are some universities that would agree with you. So let's look at the University of Melbourne now, and obviously the US model in general, where they make everyone do a science degree and then they can specialise. I think every university needs to make its own decision about this. Some people might think, well, if you want to be an engineer or you want to be a doctor, get on with it. A lot of kids think that. Other kids might want a more general education because they don't know what they're doing first. It might be horses for courses a little bit, but I can sympathise with what you're saying to a certain extent.
Rebecca, what about your experiences?
Thank you. Yeah, I agree with the point that you're making in that it is nice to have a bit of a general setting, but I would hope that a student that isn't really sure on what they're doing, they have the option of doing a science degree already. But what I think we're lacking is that we have, and we've seen the data from Rosalind's presentation and the review into agricultural education, we have this huge void at the moment in agriculture, and we need scientists to go into that field. And I think we can actually fulfill that by just promoting what opportunities you have in agriculture, and people that appeals to should be able to go straight into it. And anyone that's still not sure, they can go and do a general science degree. We still have that option, And I guess that's why the presentations today have been focused on ag science. Yeah.
Okay, we've got a question.
Yeah, a question to Dominique. Firstly, congratulations on sounds like a fascinating start to your career in agriculture. Well done. The question is around the PIXI program, and David Moore from Horticulture Australia. The PIXI program, as I understand it, really tries to target science into years 7 and 8, as the last speaker has mentioned. I just wondered, from your experience through the PIXI program, is that where you first engaged with science or not? And is there any data that suggests that engagement at years 7 and 8 is actually working or not? Or should we be targeting them in years 10 and 11?
Yeah, thank you for the question. I think my first involvement in science was around the beginning of high school, but I think PIXI targets students even younger than that in primary school as well, and I think that gets them first into science. They're really excited about all the competitions and things that they get involved in there, but I think the most effective is year 10 to 12. That's where I became interested in agriculture. That's where a lot of the people that I know are studying it have become interested as well. And that's where you can teach the students the most about it in the most depth, and I think that's where it becomes most effective.
Gordon Macaulay, grain growers, formerly Faculty of Agriculture, University of Sydney. I'd like to just draw to your attention the success, really, of scholarship programs and industry scholarship programs. Industry scholarship programs provided to the very best of students bring a top echelon of students into programs that make those programs much more attractive for other students as well. So my experience over a long period of time was those scholarship programs were excellent in empowering, if you like, the faculty. Now, we've got some really worrying things going on about faculties of agriculture downsizing and so on. But for me, I'm puzzled over why industry isn't very actively funding scholarships. It's their powerful leverage point in influencing students, and the very best students, into let's say agriculture, but it's not only agriculture, of course. And the question then is, what are the disincentives or the lack of incentives in industry providing those scholarships? And I'd like to direct that to Rosalind, because I suspect it's not seen as one of those really powerful leverage points in the education system. Thanks.
Yeah, I mean, I'm a little bit out of touch with all the RDCs and where they're at with all their scholarship programs. But having seen some of the work that's been done looking at the scholarship programs in the past, they do seem to be a very good route to keep scientists in the agricultural areas. One of the things that I used to work at Rurdock, that we used to find was that it was important to think about how to keep those, keep in touch with those students and make them feel part of something, as opposed to just having them isolated working on something at some university somewhere, so that they felt like they were part of an industry, part of a group, to keep them after they finished their PhDs. Otherwise, we found that sometimes we could lose them. But I'd agree, and I think other different industries, not just agriculture, looking at or are sponsoring scholarships and looking at sponsoring scholarships. There are a whole lot of other really innovative ways that industries are looking at involving scientists, and I heard of a very exciting one that's running in Canada at the moment, where there a whole lot of different industries from a whole lot of different sectors advertise a problem that they need solving, and it might be a 2-week problem or it might be a 3-month sort of problem, and it goes to this centre at this university in Canada, where they have a whole database of students that want to work to solve these problems, and they sort of matchmake them. And in that way, students are getting a lot of exposure to a range of different industries, and the industries are getting exposure to those students, and it's creating a lot of positive vibes, innovation, and good career structure sort of for the future. So there are a whole lot of different options being tried in Australia, is experimented with Australia, but not on the scale of this Canadian one, which is thousands of them a year. So yeah, but I think scholarships are a great idea.
Yeah, thanks for that question, because I was reflecting on what my economist colleagues would ask, where's the incentive? And I must admit, with my own children, looking at them going to university, I look for the courses that do have scholarships, be them small, but that shows that the industry is actually involved in it, and me as a parent, I'm encouraging my kids to get in there. So good question, thank you. Lady up the back there.
Hi, my name's Aridhiki and I'm from TAFE New South Wales, and I guess this is more of a comment than anything else, and also for the benefit of students that would be beaming in, that we've spoken about primary education, we've spoken about secondary schools, we've spoken about universities, but we've actually missed the vocational education training sector, and I think that plays a very key role in engaging students. It's another pathway into the agricultural industry and forestries and fisheries, and it's just there are programs like VET in schools where students can engage in a certificate in education in agriculture, and if they like it, then they can do the next one. They can pursue it as a pathway into university. And I think it's about educating students that there's not just one pathway. It's not just university. There are other ways to get into the field. There are other ways of learning about it. And so I think I just wanted to add that to the debate, because it's just I think it was a missing link in the discussion today.
That's probably a good point to give the microphone to the guy in front of you, Jim Prattley. I know there's a question here I can see for after Jim, just up behind the pole, just in regard to that vocational centre.
From Charles University. Just want to make a couple of quick comments. One was on Rosalind's presentation, the issue of graduate employment and salary. Those data come from the Graduate Careers Survey, and I've actually had a look at those data, and it's a sample size of 6. And so we would not want to base the future of agriculture on that level of data. It's mixed up with the whole environmental science data, and if you have a look at it, of those 6, 5 of them are in full employment, and the environmental science group are 67% in employment. So you've got 90% versus 67%, and yet it's in the category agriculture. And so we're getting this message out that it's poor employment and poor salary. I can tell you that from the discussions with the agriculture faculties that you won't get a graduate under 50 grand, and more likely 55 grand. If you have a look at that curve that Rosalind put up, that actually then shifts agriculture right up the scale towards the top few professions. And that's a message that the students are now starting to get out. I guess the other point I'd make is that we also need to know who the enemy is, and we're trying to counteract a situation in the school system where the careers advisors are actively encouraging kids out of a career in agriculture because there's no future and no jobs in it. And we know that quite clearly. I talked to University of New England new students just a week ago, about 160 of them over 3 or 4 courses, and only one of those put their hands up saying that the careers advisor gave them positive result towards agriculture. So I think we've got to not only do all these proactive things, but we've actually got to totally change the mindset of a lot of those people that are supposedly influential in where students go out of high school.
Sounds like we've also got to change the way that the data's collected.
This lady here. Well, I know we've got a long time for questions, so we'll just take 1, 2 questions and then we'll leave it.
This question to Rosalind. One of the comments that you put in your slide was that science graduates are often not regarded as valuable employees. And that's a comment that resonates with me quite strongly. I'm an agricultural science graduate 10 years ago, but when I was first embarking on my career path, it was very, very difficult to get a foot in the door, get given an opportunity, which goes against these comments that there's so many jobs in agriculture. And then you said that on the job, then you said that employers were looking for certain skills that the graduates weren't offering. And I'm wondering whether you think it's a combination that the universities should try and meet the employers halfway. The employers should be recognising that a university degree is a degree, and there's a certain element of on-the-job training that needs to happen, and not to expect the world when employing graduates. So just wondering what your thoughts are there.
Yeah, it's a really tricky area, actually. I was at the Universities Australia conference last week, and someone there put up a slide to show all of the advertisements that he'd found in the newspaper in the last however long, and every single one said graduate with 5 years of experience. Well, how are they supposed to get the 5 years of experience if everyone wants a graduate that has 5 years of experience? This is one of the reasons that they're looking at this research workforce strategy. What they're looking at is, if different career paths, now whether this, at what stage you decide you're going to have a different career path, I don't know, but what they're looking at is different career paths. So if you want to be a research academic, you would have different skills from if you actually want to be a researcher in industry. And so I think it comes back to Mike Stevens' comment to me, which is what do you know and what can you do? There was a Vice-Chancellor from Deakin University at this conference last week. They're inventing a new system they're calling electronic badging, so that every graduate, as well as having the academic transcript, has an electronic badge which is a portfolio of everything else they've done. So if they've done a presentation in front of an audience, or if they've had work experience or whatever else, they get this electronic badge that goes with them with their job applications to help them find, help employers see that they have these other skills which employers are unhappy with, such as planning and organising initiative and enterprise, self-management, teamwork, etc. So there are a lot of different solutions, but at least people are thinking about them now and looking at how to address these issues, which I think are real.
The last question. I will show you the rest of these questions at the end.
Thank you. John Mawson, also from Charles Sturt University. It's actually, I've just got some comments just reflecting on some of the issues that have been raised, and I think it's important that we bring the same level of inquiry that we expect of our science to some of the comments and the analysis of the situation. I'm a bit concerned that some of the comments that have been made are not grounded in fact, and I think Jim has pointed out some of the issues in terms of the data. Just to highlight some of the strategies and issues, I think Rosalind, you referred to collaboration. I think that's a very important point, and I'd just emphasise again, I think the point made by our TAFE representative that collaboration across the sector, so working more closely between the high school, the TAFE and the university sector, together with employers is a key strategy. Someone referred to the fact that up here, university staff are more focused on research than teaching. Now, I can't speak for all universities, but certainly in terms of Charles Sturt University, I have to say staff are very clear that 60% of their time is on teaching. Any new staff into the university that don't have experience in teaching must go through a certification process, a training process in terms of teaching skills. I'm the employer of those staff, and I put a very high emphasis, as do all of my colleagues, on teaching skills, and I think it would be quite wrong to give the impression, at least in many of the universities I'm aware of, that research is more important than teaching. I think also in terms of some of the comments that have been made, I can assure you that our graduates, most of our graduates, have jobs before they finish their final year. So it reflects the demand scenarios that we're seeing. And I think in terms of and that obviously indicates to the employers that those students are either ready or they're as ready as they'll be because there's no one else out there, and so they have to take those people anyway. Which is not to say that we can't do more. And I think in terms of the opportunities that have been, or the issues that have been identified in terms of preparing graduates for employment, one option where industry can play a role is in placements, because it's through placement opportunities that students can develop that awareness of what they need to go out with. And again, reflecting on our experience, we feel that that has been very positive in preparing our students. I also think we should just be careful not to overemphasise science in terms of agricultural careers. We need agricultural business managers as well. And across the whole spectrum, from agricultural economics, which is a key part of this conference, through to agricultural science, we need graduates all along that spectrum, and there are tremendous opportunities for graduates to move between different parts of the industry. So I think there are a lot of issues that we need to very carefully examine there and ensure that the comments that we make are reflective of practice and reality in the universities at the moment.
Okay, well, thank you very much for those. And I can't let you go without seeing some of the other questions that were posed by the students. And I've front-loaded these with the more generic ones about the future. Has your job changed anything in the world? Will we be able to combine medicine into fruits? You're starting to see the passion, the questioning coming through, so they don't have to get injections. Can I make meat in the lab without killing animals? Starting to bring a couple of things together. What do you most enjoy about it? The passion. Who inspired you? Oh, am I going back the way? No. If climate changes, will there be enough food for everyone? Topics of earlier today. Some countries have too much food. Some don't have enough. What would you think would happen, should happen to fix this problem? Can you explain how plants get their nutrients? A whole smorgasbord of questions showing that they're really interested in these topics right from an early age, and very valuable. And this is the session that we'll be participating in the coming weeks through the facilitation of Bridge 8. There's a number of zones. Agriculture is one. There's a wet and wild one, and what was the other one? Disease. Okay, so there's 3 zones that the students can participate in. But look, please join me in thanking our three speakers, and thank you for your questions and discussion afterwards.